Thank you. Okay, now hopefully this is better centered. Anyway, all right, so let me zoom in on this part. We've all seen constructive interference. Like I said, you see a rainbow of colors when you look at oil spilled on top of some water, puddle of water. The colors that you see are the ones for which the distance between these bounces are one wavelength, so we get constructive interference, right? Remember high school, I have a wave like this plus a wave like that, they're in phase, then that equals, this is up, well that one's up, so it goes up, you know, that's 1 plus 1 is 2. And minus 1 plus a minus 1 is a minus 2, so it gives me constructive interference. Whereas if I had a wave and then a wave that's 180 degrees out of phase, if those are the same size, then 1 plus a minus 1 gives me 0. Minus 1 plus a plus 1 gives me 0, so the wave cancels out. Right? So I get destructive, sorry here. If the waves are out of phase, then they add up to 0. Right? If they're in phase, they get brighter, they get stronger, brighter. All right, so that's a Bragg grating. It's just, it's basically a frequency-dependent mirror, right? Surely you can see more than that. Sorry. We'll get this video technology working right here eventually. Okay. Like I said, we've had staffing problems, new guy. Just haven't had time to train him. I thought the other TA could train him, but it hasn't worked out yet. So, thanks for your patience. So I get some colors will reflect strongly and other colors don't, so it's a frequency-dependent mirror. That's what a Bragg grating is. Now, if I put all that in fiber, then there's a F in front of it. FBG stands for fiber Bragg grating. You see these all over the place in optical telecommunications. FBGs are in all kinds of schematics. It's really useful to have a frequency selective mirror. And rather than doing all my optics on a big old optical table that costs a lot of money and I have to have lenses and holders and mirrors and the isolation vibration table that costs a fortune and it's huge. Do everything in fiber. And then it's just like putting these things together are like tinker toys or coaxial cables. They're fiber devices, but you don't have to line them up. You just connect one to the other like you connect up cables. So now that it's in fiber, it's called an FBG, right? These can be used to compensate for dispersion if you chirp it. Yes, I love doing this one live because everyone laughs at my bird call. I can't do a bird call, but if I could, it'd go chirp. Right? The frequency changes. Right? So if you chirp something, then it means the frequency somehow is changing. So if we chirp this grating, then what that means is that the spacing here changes from being this big up front to down to being this small down here. So wavelengths that match this spacing are going to be longer. So the long wavelengths are going to reflect off of the front, whereas this one doesn't see the right spacing until it gets down to the shorter wavelength spacing, and then it reflects. So one of these bounced off the front of the device, and the other one went further into the device before it came back. So this one gets delayed. So if I had the shorter wavelengths were out in front, I can put them back where they need to be by delaying them. So this is a means by which you can compensate for fiber, right? For dispersion of fiber. So the longer wavelengths are reflected from the front of the grating where the spacing matches those wavelengths. The shorter ones penetrate further into the grating before reflecting, and so they're going to experience more delay. Right? But this requires a useful device, a neat little trick called a circulator, because it's not a, here's my input, but this is also my output. Right? Normally I'd like to have something like it goes into and it goes out of like this. Right? But these are reflective rather than transmissive. So I need something else. That something else is called a circulator. Here's the way the circulator works. And I wish I had a cameraman so he could look at that and tell me if I go off camera, but I guess I can see that. Okay, looks like I'm still on. Circulator works like this. Anything that some people think of it as almost a router, right? But it's fixed in what it does. Waves coming into port number 1 here come out of port number 2. Okay, so anything coming in to port 1 comes out of port 2. Right? We'll put the rest of the device in later. First, circulator. Any wave that then bounces off of whatever, any wave going into port number 2 gets circulated to coming out of port number 3. Right? And likewise, any waves that go into port number 3 get sent out of port number 1. Okay? So such things exist, and that's what they do. So now I can use that. I've got my chirp FBG down here. So here's my input to the compensator. My compensator is all of this put together. Right? So my wave comes in, it gets routed to port 2, gets sent into the chirped FBG, which does its dispersion compensation, then it bounces back off of that, coming into port number 2, then it gets routed to coming out of port 3. Okay, so it just comes in. Here's my input, and then here's my output. So that's a neat little trick that's often used. Because otherwise, what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to shine light in at some angle, and then take the output off at some angle, but then it's a mess. It's not as practical, so that's the way it's done. And these days, you can have circulators that are in fiber. Okay, so again, it's like putting Tinker Toys together to build up a system. Very nice. All right, so that's it on dispersion compensation and which one leads and all of that. I think we'll break this up into a couple lectures, so I'll back in a minute.